Hey Kings, let's do this. Welcome back to the Augustus Maximus channel, also known as the quintessential European virtual YouTuber, as well as the utmost proponent of radical virtual YouTuberism. And today we are again playing Hearts of Iron 4, however this time we're playing the Glory of Prussia mod, and basically using the same mods that we did in the last two videos, but we are using a different map mod. We're using the Theatrum Orbis Terra mod, which just makes the map look a little bit more medieval, more of a medieval map look to it. And I like that because we're playing as Prussia, and we're going to be staging a military coup instead of going with the Kaiser. And since we're still staying non-aligned, not really going in any radical direction, and Prussia is very much sort of a well, early modern age era type of state, which is quite famous for being extremely militaristic. I thought it actually fit quite a bit, and well, I just like the look of the mod, so here we go. I like the look of the map, and it looks fairly interesting, at least in my perspective. And so as you can see, it essentially the backstory to this is that after the Versailles Treaty, somehow Prussia broke off, somehow a bunch of former German states broke off. Danzig is a thing in this mod, and that's basically that. And Prussia is now, or Eastern Prussia, Ostpreußen, which is regularly just a province of Germany in vanilla, is now a state under Wilhelm II. There's also a bunch of like small separatist regions throughout the eastern part of Germany that are now sort of like Prussian resistance movements, whatever. They're just basically just independent states within the sphere of Germany, and it's kind of interesting. You can sort of annex them, you can integrate them later, they can integrate themselves. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on with them, but today we're doing Prussia, proper Prussia. And it's basically the focus of the mod, obviously, because it is called the Glory of Prussia. And we're going to be assuming direct control with von Mackensen today. Now this is going to be a bit of a shorter video because there isn't much actually you can do with Prussia in this mod. There's basically a bunch of directions the game or the developers of the mod want you to go into. They want you to take back Germany, which that's boring. We've done that 1,000 times. Essentially just playing Germany. You've played Germany 1,000 times if you played Hearts of Iron 4, and if you haven't played Germany in Hearts of Iron 4, then go play Germany in Hearts of Iron 4. It's kind of fun to go monarchist, and you're just playing monarchist Germany if you go back and retake Germany as Prussia. That's kind of like meh, right? You can establish a bunch of colonies, and we'll be doing that because that's kind of interesting, you know. That's not necessarily something you really do with this mod, because at least back in the day when I played this back in release, like 2 years ago or something like that, it well, the reinstation of the colonial empire didn't really have much of a purpose. You really didn't get much out of it, and it turns out you still don't get much out of it, but you get a few resources. You do get a few provinces, some manpower, some factories out of it. If the eventually when the puppets and when your colonial puppets actually do gain the focus trees, and they do go down the industrial focus trees, you still do gain a few factories here and there. It's not much, you know. I would have hoped that they would have had some sort of integration of these colonial lands, sort of a more in-depth integration into the actual theme of the mod. Something maybe unique for the military dictatorship to do, but unfortunately it's just, you know, you get a bunch of puppets essentially, and it takes a long time, but it's a few more provinces, few more factories, so it's actually quite beneficial to do in the long run. Now, what's interesting about the military dictatorship thing that we're going down now is that you do get Mackinson. Obviously, he's extremely powerful, one of the most overpowered generals in the entire game, or country leaders in the entire game. But you do gain a little bit more of a power struggle mechanic with him. Unfortunately, the power struggle mechanic, like, in a sense, it's kind of cool, because essentially you do gain a more military sort of organization, and your military does gain more power. However, every 70 days you do have to give up like 50 political power to keep the military in check so that you don't enter into a civil war. It's basically a balance of power between Wilhelm and the military, essentially meaning a power struggle between Wilhelm and Mackensen. And while that does sound interesting, it definitely is kind of interesting, it's not necessarily worth it, because, well, you have one of the best country leaders in the game. You have insane defense on core territory. You have insane offense on core territory. You gain insane bonuses to your military as it is, just by the basic military focus tree. You have insane generals. You have insane military advisors and military staff. It's just not worth it. You know, it's a cool mechanic. You know, you sort of give them more organization, more attack, but you have to spend like 50 or to 100 political power every 70 days, I think it was. And that's cool in theory, not in practice. Not in practice, it's not cool, and you just don't want to bother with it. You know, every 70 days clicking a button in the decision tab just to keep your bonuses up. Or if you forget it, let's say for 140 days, because that's completely easy to do, just forgetting about something, then you just, well, enter into a civil war, and that's quite inconvenient. So we'll be immediately getting rid of that whole mechanic, not gonna bother with it. Kinda, well, not unnecessary. Kind of cool, you know, in theory it's kind of cool. However, I wished it functioned more, for example, as the MIFO bills in when playing vanilla Germany. Because really having to tick something every 70 days, that's kind of meh. So we're just gonna be getting rid of that, getting rid of the debuff, getting entirely rid of Wilhelm II. We're completely assuming direct control with Mackinson, and that's going to be that. One of the cooler things you can do in this mod, you know, in perspective, is actually acquiring Danzig, the sort of city-state and the surrounding region of Danzig. It's kind of interesting because you essentially are on a timer, and there we go. We're going to gain the province of Gdańsk, which just means Danzig in Polish. So it's kind of strange. You have this strange separation of Danzig and Gdańsk. I suppose it's sort of used to represent Gdańsk, the region, as sort of the Polish surrounding area of the, you know, of Danzig proper, which is like the city-state, or the city, essentially. And so there is that kind of separation. It's kind of interesting. At the same time, there's a time limit on it, which is, well, essentially you have to do it before the city-state, or the country that is a city-state, essentially, decides to gain access to Gdańsk, the surrounding area. The Polish essentially do give them on, sort of traditionally the AI does give them the surrounding area to the city-state, and at that point you can only take Danzig through military means. But they are, I think they are guaranteed, or they are a puppet of Poland. And so, well, you can just do that when you fight Poland itself, or you can just not bother with Poland, because, well, fighting Poland certainly is an interesting alternative. However, the way that we're going to play today, we are going to be dealing with a big red beast to the east, and so Poland, probably more of an ally than a foe, really. And there we go, the Prussian separatists decided to fully integrate themselves. In practice, this doesn't actually mean that much. In theory, it means that you're more likely to get attacked by Germany if you're not careful. Sometimes, I think, if you go, like, democratic or communist, and you integrate within them, I think that because you have such low relations with Germany, you're owning their core territory, essentially, even though it is also your core territory. That's just how it works out. It means, I think, they can justify on you if you're not going with historical, or if you're going with, like, chaos AI. I do think the Germans can justify on you, and so that can mean you end up in kind of a sticky situation, but in practice just means you get a bunch more factories and manpower. Really, the separatists have an ungodly amount of factories for what they actually own, which is like less than one state if you actually look at the, well, the land mass. But they do have quite a lot of factories and quite a lot of manpower, in fact, and quite a few units, so well, overall it's pretty good. Now, you might have noticed there are a few countries between us and the Soviet Union, more specifically the Baltic countries. Now, I did do a focus which allows us to essentially Anschluss Lithuania, or the fate of Lithuania, as you can see. And they can refuse that. If they do, then the territories are going to be a bit rowdy. However, we have, oh yeah, there we go. We have such a strong army for being essentially just a couple of provinces of separatists from basically Germany. Less legitimate state than an actual legitimate state, but I don't know, maybe the AI takes into consideration your overall military power, because sometimes they can actually refuse. If you do the, for example, if you do the fate of Lithuania before the Prussian separatists actually join your country, I think they sometimes refuse because you just don't have the, I don't know, maybe land mass, maybe the manpower, maybe the military factory count, or the civilian factory count, or something like that, I don't know. But sometimes they can just refuse. However, next on the chopping block is definitely Latvia. It's kind of a shame that we can't just demand the Anschluss of Latvia. I would have liked to actually do that, but unfortunately, looks like we're just gonna have to go in to secure our border regions. However, our border regions are technically constantly expanding, which means that we're constantly going to be in a state of war with the bordering territories, which means that in any sense, our border regions are never going to be secure, and so that means we're constantly going to have to attack people on our border regions, which means that our border regions are going to be expanding, which means that our border regions are constantly going to be threatened. Well, it's a fine cycle if you ask me. Speaking of which, Estonia is next. Technically, we already border the Soviet Union, but Estonia, well, they tend to give in to the Soviets and really don't want that. See, that would threaten our borders. And Estonia isn't actually all that big of a threat, but the Soviet Union is, and the Estonians do give in to the Soviet Union, which means that Estonia, technically, through a third party, is threatening our borders, which means that, well, we just have to annex them, don't we? And while we are on the theme of expanding borders, there we go, liberation of our former colonies. Now, since we've gained all these valuable border regions of the Baltic, I think it's only right that we do regain our former colonial holdings in Africa, because, well, it's obviously quite beneficial to the state of well, I don't know, just general liberty, right? I mean, we're trying to free these colonies from the state of war that is just thrashing Africa apart. We really don't want that, and we want our former colonial subjects to just feel safe. We want them to feel safe, we don't want them to feel threatened, and so we'll be bringing them back. You see, there's a bunch of bad things going on in the world. For example, the Republic in Spain, which is completely bugged in this mod, by the way. They don't actually have a way of getting rid of their pre-Civil War debuffs. So that's kind of strange, but there's a republic in Spain in this mod, so that's kind of strange. And the war that's in Africa, that's just really terrible. We just want our former subjects to feel safe, so we're bringing them back into the fold. We've gotten rid of the Kaiser guys, you know, we're good now, we're good. We might be a military junta, technically, and our leader might be a completely insane general. Well, he's not actually insane. Maybe in this timeline he's insane. Well, he's just kicked out a Kaiser, become sort of a dictator, essentially, and annexed a bunch of states, tripled the size of his landmass. So, yeah, I think he's the right guy for the job. Okay, so I'm justifying on the Soviet Union, but a bunch of things just happened, and the Soviets, yeah, they should be at war with the Polish, and the Polish haven't actually joined the Allies yet, which is interesting. So you might be able to... There we go, we can create a faction with them, but is it really worth it? I'm already justifying on them, and, yeah, let's do it. Let's call it... Let's be really creative here. The Anti-Soviet Pact. Wow. Great creativity. Mackinson just comes up with these titles like it's nothing. We can join the war. Technically, we'll be on the defending side instead of the attacking side, so we can actually gain a little bit more war support that way. And so we're totally just defending the liberty of our Polish brothers here. And it's not like we just wanted, you know, more land. It's not like we just wanted to destroy the Soviet Union. It's not like we wanted revenge. It's not like we wanted any of that. It's not like we wanted Brest-Litovsk Vol 2, Electric Boogaloo at all. No. You misunderstand. We're defending Poland here, guys. We're defending Poland. We even created a faction with them, see? And while the Soviets basically dragged themselves into war with the Allies as well, that means that we are on the side of the Allies, actually. We're the good guys here. And, yeah, we are the liberators and completely the fighters for democracy. This is completely legitimate, I assure you. But on a more serious note, since our military is so strong, since we have so many buffs to basically everything, and since we are only facing the Soviet Union, which is still overcoming the debuffs of the Great Purge, and since they're an offensive war, I don't actually know they don't have the ability to go down with the Great Patriotic War, so their debuffs should be quite severe still. And so we're just completely thrashing them. This is going to be just a brief push into Moscow. And really, I'll take this opportunity to just talk about the mod, because it's great fun, you know, it's great fun. This has only just been a bit of a campaign to go after the Soviet Union. There we can see Officers purged, still big debuff. But for some reason they have don't mess with Prussia. I guess this is the way the mod wanted to balance it out, because what used to happen, the old versions of the mod, is that the Soviets would just justify you when you just weren't ready, and back then the Prussians really didn't have that many buffs, and so every single campaign, whether you wanted to go with the Allies, whether you wanted to go with the Germans, whether you wanted to go with whoever, except for the Soviets just attack you, because you always are led down, or at least back in the day, you were always led down the path of just annexing the Baltic states. And so this is just sort of a blast from a past. Well, essentially, the mod itself, I think it's great. You know, the mod itself certainly does have quite a big appeal because it allows you to be monarchist Germany, essentially, but also have quite a bit of viability when it comes to just doing different things, because monarchist Germany in the vanilla game has basically just, you either go east or west, and usually you go both ways, but first you go east, and then you go west. And that just always happens, whereas with vanilla Germany, without going monarchist, you have a lot of options. So even though they have this alternate path, it always ends up the same way, and actually even if you go democratic as Germany, it always ends up that way. But then you just go east. You don't even bother with the west, and that's a big issue. So I think this mod is great. This time we again ended up going east, but we actually didn't have to. The modifier for the Soviet Union, which essentially makes them not go for Prussia, means that you can just do whatever you want. We could have annexed the Baltic and then went for Poland. We could have returned, I think, the territory to the Soviet Union anyway to keep on their good side. Maybe that's sort of a campaign if you're trying to go with the communist side. I don't know, but a communist Prussia just sounds cursed. So yeah. Anyway, I think the mod is great. It also gives you a little bit more playability if you just want to play in the Baltic, or you just want to play in the Eastern Europe in general, but you don't necessarily want to play Poland or Romania because you've played them to death, and Poland's just kind of a drag because the Germans are always there, the Soviets are always there. So you want to play within the Baltic territory, but you don't want to play Poland because, well, the same things happen every single time. Whether you're playing as Poland in 1936, you're just delaying the state of Poland in 1939. She can do a variety of things in between, but the Germans are always going to ask for Danzig, the Soviets are always going to ask for Eastern Poland, and you can appease one of them, but appeasing both of them means you have no campaign. So this is, I think, a great mod if you just want to play in the Baltic region. And overall, the military buffs, I think, are a little bit too much. I mean, we're essentially just a small little nation, but we have absurd levels of manpower, and we have an insane military. I mean, sure, you can say that, you know, Prussia was extremely militaristic, and this is just sort of a continuation of that, and I agree, you know, that's a great theme for the mod. But in the vein of that, I think that maybe it's a little bit too OP. But other than, you know, being just extremely powerful, because it's 1941, we're just smashing the Soviets like it's nothing. We have essentially 100+ divisions and 130+ divisions, and well, it's quite easy actually. So we might be stretched quite thin, but with the addition of Poland and essentially Poland fighting against them, it's just Poland. You know, like Poland and the Baltic itself never has a chance against the Soviets. Unless, you know, there's like an insane circumstance where the Soviets just keep throwing manpower, just completely annihilating themselves. So, in a sense, you know, the mod, maybe tone it down, maybe tone down the military buffs by like 20%, you know, just to make the war a little bit more tough, just to make you think a little bit more about immediately just creating a faction with Poland and just completely smashing the Soviets like it's no bother. Maybe, you know, maybe, just maybe, but overall I think that it's a great mod. Ultimately, the colonies in Africa actually don't give you that much, kind of a shame, but I think it's a bit too expensive, you know, to create the Middle Africa state, to actually, you know, have all of the African colonies sort of united. It's never sort of a big enough deal for you to completely focus just on the colonial stuff instead of focusing on Europe. And ultimately the path of just becoming Germany again, a little bit too boring, but if you really like that, there we go, we just took Moscow. But if you like that, then sure, you know, it's a path, it's definitely a path, the internal siege of Leningrad. But it's a path you can go down, it's not too much of a bother either way. You can just use the colonial stuff to buff yourself before, you know, eventually confronting Germany. However, Germany in this mod is denied sort of going for Danzig. They only go west. Maybe because, well, they don't want to confront Prussia. Like, realistically speaking, it's a strange, you know, it's a strange conundrum that Germany would be in this kind of situation, because they're essentially being challenged to legitimacy, so they would be more likely to actually declare war on you. And the buffs themselves are kind of strange. What I mean is the sort of state of the Soviet Union not actually wanting to attack you. In a realistic sense, kind of strange. In a gameplay sense, absolutely brilliant. I really love that. So in the gameplay sense, actually really good. Realistic sense, in a historical sense, sort of strange, but in a historical sense, really would have Prussian actually broken up? Would have there been a bunch of separatists in Germany? Maybe, maybe not. Not entirely sure. Would have Danzig actually remained a free city if Prussia seceded? Maybe not. Maybe, who knows? But ultimately, I think this mod is really great. Obviously, we're going to just completely dominate in this conflict. The Soviets don't have, well, anything left, really. We've smashed them at the worst time possible, but, you know, that's the state of the Soviet Union focus tree anyway. They can't get rid of the debuffs, and if the Germans don't split Poland with them, and they immediately go for Poland before Finland, which they always do, then even Poland's just gonna kind of dominate them before, you know, before Russia or the Soviet Union ever gets a chance to really get rid of the debuffs from the Great Purge. So, yeah, it's a great laugh, but ultimately we're just going to destroy the Soviets. There we go. The Red Beast in the east is now the monarchist puppet state in the east. But they don't actually have any sort of picture when you actually puppet Russia under a monarchist regime, which is well, that's like the biggest disappointment of all time. However, I guess it's kind of okay. Anyway, this was a great mod. I definitely encourage everyone to check it out if you want to play as Prussia, or if you just want to play as monarchist Germany but not do the same stuff over and over and over again. And if you actually want to maybe play with a few colonies in Africa as monarchist Germany, because that's something that's definitely lacking from the monarchist path in, well, vanilla. So, yeah, Kings, well, anyway, thanks for watching, and see you next time.